You're listening to the Ground Transportation Podcast with Ken Lucci of Driving Transactions and James Blaine of PAX Training. Learn how you can build a thriving transportation business with real profits, repeat clients, and enterprise value. And now for your hosts, Ken and James.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Ground Transportation Podcast. Unfortunately, I don't have Ken with me. Ken is off doing a financial deal, I'm sure, or educating someone on the proper way to run their finances. We'll have another episode together soon. But I'm super stoked about my guest today. It's someone that I've actually known for quite a while. I've had the opportunity to work with him in some associations and some other places. And I think we're all really lucky to kind of hear from him. Welcome, Matt. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you, James? Thank you for having me.
I'm good. I'm excited about this one. We spend a lot of time on the safety side. We spend a lot of time on that world, which I know is where you live. I know that's where I live. So I'm really excited about this episode. But you actually have quite a bit of background in it. You're not even in the same company you were when we first met. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of how you got into the industry and how you get to where you are today?
25, maybe 26 years ago, I started out as a bus driver with yet another company. And I drove for about a year and a half. And then I worked as a dispatcher. I was in charter sales. I was the outside sales manager and eventually was an operations manager for them. And then I was there for about 8 years. I left there, went to work for a school bus company. I was a GM for them for some time. And then I went to my last employer and I was there for over a decade and, great place and great folks there. And then I came to Greyhound about almost 2 years ago. It was November of 2023 that I started with them as the director of safety. And I have enjoyed it. I got promoted to regional vice president in January thereafter. So January of 2024. And it's been an excellent experience overall. Really enjoyed it.
Well, and you're in a really unique place, right? There's a lot of people that don't kind of go down that same path. You've got this awesome opportunity and that you've sat in all of these seats, right? Pun intended. And you've gotten to see the business kind of from different angles. One of the things that I love to ask, especially for people who start on the driving side, is how exactly do you end up driving a motor coach? Is this something where, like, hey, I want to drive a bus, or was this a stepping stone? What was that first step in getting into it?
Actually, one of my mentors along my way, Colin Johnson, who he was a vice president at a company called Peter Pan. And he knew me as an employee of a casino in Connecticut. And he was a vendor and kind of talked me into coming to work there. And it was probably one of the best things that I did for myself, And it sounded exciting. The pay sounded good. It just sounded like a different adventure. So it was like, yeah, let's try this. And I've had people tell me that I choose to work here because I want to be on your team. Yeah. And that's like one of the most flattering things that I think someone can say to me. And, it was kind of the same thing. It was somebody who I seen as a leader, this really intelligent guy. I want to learn what these people do. And so I went into their training program and got my CDL.
So you get your CDL, you start driving, you start working your way through. I got to tell you, I have found that more cases than you would think are exactly what you're talking about, right? I want to work for this person. I want to work with this person. It's kind of a leadership role. And what I always find interesting, and I'd love to get your perspective on this, is that a lot of being a driver, and it doesn't matter if you're in the coach world, doesn't matter what side you're in, a lot of it really isn't a team sport. And so I always love to talk to people that are able to see that leadership and feel that, because one of the things I hear when I'm traveling the country doing training, working with people is, well, once we get out there on the road, it's just us and the customers, right? It's not, I feel like I'm part of the team, but I'm kind of out there doing my own thing. So let me ask you, as someone who's been in all of those roles, what was it that this person was able to do that let you feel like you're part of that team, that was able to bridge that gap? And then how were you able, obviously you've had that same position of where you've gotten people to come work for you. How have you been able to kind of bridge that gap and make that more of a team sport, knowing that it's really an individualized role?
It kind of is like that coach-player relationship. You would come with a problem that you didn't know how to solve or a situation that you had never been in before. And that coach figure or that mentor figure he or she may actually not know the exact answer, but they know how to lead you down the path. And you
Right.
feel like, I trust this person and hey, I need fuel and I am in Altoona, Pennsylvania, and there is not
Yeah.
and well, hang on, let's check this website, or hang on, you can go here. They always knew how to guide you. And it just, you felt like, hey, these are people that can help me along my way, and I can learn a lot from them. And then you wind up passing that knowledge on time and time
Right.
again. You know, we were talking earlier about Crawford Lasseter. He's going to receive the 2025 CVSA International Safe Driver Award. Crawford and I actually met when I was a driver.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I was horrendously lost that day. I will tell you, it
Okay.
was.
So set the stage for us, right? I could feel a good story coming. So set the stage. Where are we at?
We're on our way into New York City to the
Okay.
Port Authority for the very first time in my life, mind you. Not understanding the correct way in and out of that building, or where
Right.
to go when you arrive inside of that building, or anything for
Huh.
that matter, and had sweat through my shirt. I remember this. It was a hot day. It had nothing to do with air conditioning. It was everything to do with my nerves and being scared, right?
But bus
And
full of passengers, or on your
oh
way for
yeah,
passengers?
oh
Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
oh
Loaded
oh,
already.
so
Already loaded.
some very, very patient passengers, as you can imagine, right? And pulled in, and Crawford,
Huh.
who was a Greyhound driver even back then, he started driving in 1979, and Crawford was there and spotted me and said, "You need some help?" And I said, "Yes," with like the most big yes I've ever yesed in my yes, right? So he very patiently, I mean, for
Huh.
with no motivation whatsoever, the guy guided me. He gave me advice. He wrote out directions for me to get back. He was just invaluable in that moment. And I walked away from that experience saying, I want to be like this guy. He was so professional. He was so patient with me and, with the passengers and my probably fumbling questions. And you never forgot him. And I'll tell you, just to bring that together, 20 some odd years later, I'm the regional vice president for this company. And I am addressing all the trainers in the classroom, and I'm trying to get a feel for how the driver training school is going.
Right.
And this trainer looks at me and says, "We've met before." And I said, "I'm sorry, I think I just met you for the first time today." And he says, "I remember your first time at the Port Authority." And it was Crawford Lasseter. So,
Yeah.
I was just like, and immediately remembered the entire experience. I don't know how I'll never forget that. That goes with
Right.
me till the day I die. But, it was very interesting to see him in a different perspective, in a different way. And, it's incredible the training that he gives to the students, and, his mission is to create the next generation of bus drivers. So, it was a great experience overall.
Well, and it's funny because one of the things that, and you've heard me talk before, you've said in some of my talks, my big thing is that you really want to be more of a coach, and you nailed it on the head, right? That coach player relationship. Because most people, when you think of a trainer in a typical corporate sense, it's, hey, I'm going to show you a bunch of stuff. You're going to forget most of it. We're going to turn you loose. You're going to be on your own. Whereas people like that understand kind of that coach relationship, you have to have the patience. You have to empower people. You have to give them the opportunity. All of those types of things create a completely different experience on the learning side. And what's interesting is, in his case, he remembered that day for you, right? For him, that might have just been a Tuesday or a Thursday or whatever day of the week it was. And he sees someone and says, "Hey, yeah, I'm going to help this guy out. I remember my first day there." For you, this is like this pivotal, take it to the grave type moment. And
Oh
so
yeah.
I think the biggest thing for me, especially when I'm seeing stuff like this, is understanding that there's this awesome opportunity to pass on knowledge, and to understand that even though we're all out there by ourselves, kind of like you said, there's that opportunity to coach and work together. So I think it's very fitting and very deserving that now he's winning that award all these years later, but he was actually able to help you at that point.
Yeah, he's an incredible guy, and there's no one I know more deserving. So he really set the standard.
Yeah.
A uniform, his actions, his willingness to accommodate the customers and take time for the students, and he's a pretty incredible guy. So I think we're very lucky to get to work with him.
Well, and I think it's interesting because clearly it sounds like his role has shifted, your role shifted. Let me ask you, in going from obviously that first early on day, when you actually stepped out of the driver's seat, you said you'd held all these different roles. What is it that actually got you out of the driver's seat? What's the main reason that you were kind of pulled from the driver's seat and started moving into the other roles?
The same guy.
It all comes back to one point.
We have a few jokes that
Yeah.
Colin and I know his wife, and his wife refers to me as his like third son, and I still talk to him once in a while, and they still actually go to some AVA events. So
Yeah.
I'd love to introduce you someday, but it was his idea, and said, this is something I think you could do, and I said, all right, let's go. I was interested, and it's the same thing. I knew if I followed him, there was a clear path, right, and he offered a lot of years of experience and was willing to teach me and was patient. And then, even post that, so I leave that company and I worked for this school bus company for a while. And one day I get a phone call from a number that I had associated with
Huh.
a whole different thing. I knew the company, and it was him. And he said, I'm the vice president at this company. And I said, wow, congratulations. I'm really happy. And he
Huh.
said, I'm looking for a director of operations. Would you be interested? And this is years later, and
Right.
without hesitation, I said, yeah, absolutely. When do I start? I wasn't worried about how much did it pay, or, all the things you're going to worry about. Does it have
Right.
insurance? What are my hours? All the
Yeah.
things that you think about. I just knew I wanted to work for him. Right. So it was that, he was the coach of the team that you knew was going to win. So you wanted to be on that team.
Right.
There's a few things that inspire me to do what I do now, and that's one of them. I want to be the VP, the regional vice president of the region that everybody wants to work in, because we're doing great things, and because we're doing it the best. We're putting in maximum effort. We're treating our customers right. We're doing it safely. Safety first with everything we do, and it's a good place to work. And that's part of my inspiration, is to kind of be like him.
Yeah.
And, I think a lot of people felt that way about him. He's still obviously alive, but he's retired since, and incredible guy. I won't lie to you that I've worked for some really incredible people in my career that I've learned a lot from. And, I've been very, very fortunate. And in my current capacity, our COO, Rodney, very inspirational leader, really knows how to get the best from people, I think. And that helps feed what I do in my region. And I think that I'm fortunate to get to continue to have, great mentors and great leaders that I get to work with. So
I've got to tell you, it seems like every single, right. If we ever had to rename the podcast, I think it would be the Go Get a Mentor podcast, right? Because
yeah,
every single episode that we have, every time we have conversations with people, there's always kind of a pivotal moment, and there's always kind of a pivotal person. I always tell people when they ask me about me, I think of when I first came to PAX, right? And the idea that we were going to do ongoing training and a certification in the industry and do it online, everybody's like, are you nuts? Right? Like this is totally new, totally crazy. And I went back to like this Jim Rohn quote that I'd heard, right? It's not about what you're getting, kind of like you said, with the pay, the benefits, you're not worried about it. It's not about what you're getting. It's about what you're becoming, and
correct.
knowing that you're going to be on that right team, knowing you're going to be in the right place. So I think you're really kind of hitting on what I hear so often with people that have found success in the industry, is finding the right people tends to put you in the right place. So you've gotten to the point now where you're over at Greyhound. Now, I know that for a lot of people, they saw Flix and Greyhound coming together. There's kind of some confusion there. I think in general, of people trying to understand, okay, did Flix buy it? Was there a merger? What did that look like? Do you come in before or after that takes place?
After. So Flix acquired Greyhound in 2021.
Okay.
Flix is an amazing company. Just from the, my perspective and my experience with them, they're very big on equality, very customer centric, all the things that any great business could be.
Yeah.
And the relationship with Greyhound and Flix is, I think, absolutely fantastic. And, it gives us, I think, a lot of potential for big growth. Flix is all over the place. I mean, I meet passengers who are from Germany or any part of Europe. And when they see the Flix logo on the Greyhound bus, they're like, oh, Flix. And it's almost like a sigh of relief, like, because they're unfamiliar with Greyhound. And but they see Flix and they associate with it. And they're like, this trip is going to be fantastic. Things are going to go very well. And, I think that is great for Greyhound. And, I think the partnership is amazing.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Flix starts over in Europe, obviously now with you guys here at Greyhound, they're operating in the United States. Does Flix operate globally then? What are kind of the markets that Flix has?
I'm not a Flix market expert, but I
Okay.
can tell you that
Just in general, right? We'll have
y-
the
y-
market expert guy on later, but just to give people an idea of kind of the scale of Flix.
Europe, Turkey, Chile, and there's several more countries. It's a very, very big company, and there's also the Flix train element of the company. I have forever admired the business concept, and I really think it's ingenious.
Yeah. No, and as someone that has family in Europe, I mean, like you said, it's one of those things where if you're coming over from Europe, they're going to have the brand recognition, they're going to know the name. So it's neat to have kind of a global brand. So with that in mind, you've got kind of your region here in the US. What does it look like for you day to day? I mean, obviously, you're working with a larger company, but what does it look like for you day to day when you're thinking about how you guys are operating, what you guys are doing, kind of those areas? What are the things that you're focused on? Because, I think especially a lot of the operators that are wanting to reach scale, they might not have aspirations to reach the level of Greyhound where they're all over the country, but you guys manage an incredibly large fleet. You guys have got units all over the US, trips going on at any one point in time. So what does it look like kind of operating at scale?
I will tell you that it all comes back to the beginning. The thing that I focus on the most is drivers.
Yeah.
Our motor coach operators, are we doing the right thing with them? Are we putting them in, the best possible scenario all the time? Are we giving them the tools that they need to do the job? It's always safety and drivers.
Yeah.
It's what it comes back to. A driver instructor, when I was learning to drive a bus, once told me, you got to give them the sleeping pill. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, when you're driving the bus smooth
Yeah.
and your actions are
Uh,
safe and you look in the mirror and all your passengers are having a good nap on the way, he says, that's when you've made it, that you are a
yeah.
good driver. Those are the kinds of things that I think we can, focusing on safety, I think really begins in the training aspect of driver training,
Oh,
you know,
100%.
and you have to give them the skills they need to do their job.
No, and I have to tell you a couple things. One, I think you've hit on what, and in PAX we call it the biggest compliment you can ever receive, right? If you are driving so smoothly, so safely that people are falling asleep, like you said, you're doing exactly what you should be. Because what's interesting is, even though it's a motor coach, everybody drives a car. Everybody's on that same road, right? In most of the cases, that's a road they may have driven on, they could drive on, right? It's not like you're somewhere they're never going to be. And I think people notice more than you think when, there's a truck that's too close, or, you're riding the guy in front of you, you're following too closely. I think a lot of people also forget we've got at the front of the bus a giant windshield. So if I'm, one bumper length off the guy in front of me, everybody on the back of the bus that's looking forward can see that. And I'm obviously I'm more sensitive than most. There's been times I've been on a bus and I'm kind of leaning in the aisle going, ugh. But I think knowing that is huge, and understanding that ultimately it's the driver. It doesn't matter what you're doing in terms of your structure, your policies, your this, your that. Your drivers have to take everything that you're putting together, everything you're doing, and ultimately they're kind of that face to the passenger. And I've got to tell you, I think one of the big advantages that you've got is having sat in that driver's seat. We see a lot of people that come into the ad industry that don't ever get to really sit there, that don't ever get to really see it that way. And sometimes you kind of see a disconnect as a result. So I think one of the things that I would ask is, if you had to pick what is the single most important aspect when it comes to training or safety or whatever it might be, being able to come from that driver role, what are some of the kind of the top things that you see that are, hey, these are the keys. These are the big things. These are the absolute have to do that I've seen from all of my experience.
I couldn't possibly focus just to one thing in my mind, but some of the things that I tell the drivers, like in driver training,
Yeah.
is that plan ahead for everything. And I don't
Oh,
mean that,
absolutely.
and it's not just get ready for your turn before you're on your turn. And it's, do you have your clothes for tomorrow? Is your uniform set for tomorrow? Did you set an
Yeah.
alarm? Did you get yourself to bed on time? Did you have a good meal? Did you say goodbye to your significant other when you left the house? Right? Prepare yourself at all times and give yourself the biggest advantages that you can by never putting yourself in that scenario where you're in a rush. I think that that is kind of pivotal to having a good career as a driver. I still to this day, I can tell you what I'm wearing tomorrow. I can tell you, my shirt's already ironed.
Yeah.
Prepare yourself in advance. And, always, as in whatever role I've had, I'm such a firm believer in, and if I can't be on time, I'm going to be early. Right.
Right.
So I would rather be a half hour early for something and be waiting around and ready and relaxed. And I just think, set yourself up for success as often as you can, as, in any position. But, I think it's especially helpful in a role like that, where everything is about time and precision and safety and doing the safest possible thing all the time. And, when we talk about like, what does safety mean to you and things like that, it's always, doing the right thing all the time, even when nobody's paying attention. Those are the things, if you're prepared and you're mentally ready for those things, I think it gives them an advantage in that role. So, those are the kind of, helpful pointers and stuff like that I try to give people.
Well, and I'm going to take us completely like total left field here, but I always think back to the movie Limitless, right? For anybody that hasn't seen the movie Limitless, there's this pill, and you take this pill and it unlocks, right, your full potential. It's a smart pill. You're suddenly focused, you're smart, you're intelligent. And, I watched that movie and I thought it was great. Like, oh man, we got to get the Limitless pill. But the cool thing about it is if you watch that movie, the very first thing this guy does, he takes this pill. He's suddenly the absolute smartest, best version of himself. The very first thing this guy does is go on a cleaning spree, an organizing spree. He gets everything organized. He gets everything clean. He gets everything in place. Right? Exactly what you're talking about. Now, just kind of bring it back to where we were, right? Not just talk about movies. But the big thing there is being intentional. It's if I'm going to be the most powerful, the most intelligent, the best version of myself, I'm going to be intentional. I'm going to know where things are. I'm going to be prepared. I'm going to have everything at my fingertips. And I think especially when it comes to, and I think this probably is great advice for anyone beyond driving as well, because I see it with a lot of people for work, right? It's, well, I go to work, I get that done, but they're not thinking about, okay, what do I have to do to get ready? At the end of my day, what do I prepare for tomorrow? What do I have coming? How can I be intentional about everything that I'm doing? And I think when you start doing that, you start seeing real change. So I think that's, from a driver standpoint, it's something that a lot of people don't think about. But I can tell you one of the big things that I hear come up all the time is diet and exercise. It is so easy on the road to just eat junk.
Oh, it is. I don't know if you know this or not, but in that era of my life, I also weighed 450 pounds.
No way. There was 3 of you, or
Yeah.
maybe 4 of you with how your current weight, right? So for anybody that's listening, right, Matt looks like he could probably fit 2 or 3 times into someone 400 pounds, right? I had no idea. And that said, we've known each other for years now.
Yeah. It's been about 17 years since I lost the weight.
Wow.
But yeah, had definitely created some health issues for myself, and I decided that I wanted to be a better version of myself,
Yeah.
and diet and exercise, and just it's incredible as you go with a journey like that, how much better you feel throughout it. And I think I have a greater understanding than some about that. When all you make available to yourself is junk food, right? You're going to eat it. And it definitely, you don't realize it at the time, but diet, exercise, and proper rest are so important. It will change your outlook on life. I was talking to a vendor yesterday who said, I don't know how you're not exhausted all the time. And I just kind of laughed. I said, when you love what you do, it's not hard. And he
Right.
said, you're upbeat, you're positive and all that. I think more so now than ever, but I like what I do. I like the people
Right.
that I work for, and I enjoy my job. So it makes it easy to truly enjoy it. But it also speaks to eating proper food and getting proper rest. And, I think we all are a better version of ourselves when we take care of ourselves.
Well, and I can tell you that at least I've recently, in the past couple of years, right, I've started getting a lot more active. There was kind of that point in my life where, it was nothing but travel, but work, but, and you're eating whatever's there and you're doing whatever's there. Now that I'm actively golfing again, I'm playing hockey again, right? More so the hockey than the golf is probably responsible for keeping me in shape. I don't know that me driving a cart around is helping much, but, last night out playing hockey, all these things. I think the big thing that I find is when you become active, it's easier to stay active. When you're eating right, it's easier to keep eating right. Let me ask you something, having been on that transformation, I've been on that journey. What would you say the impact was when you were at that point versus now on your reaction time, your ability to do those types of things that you need to in terms of react and think ahead? And have you felt a massive difference in your
Oh,
ability to do that?
absolutely. Absolutely. I think mentally and physically, I think I feel much more nimble than I did back then, if that makes sense.
Oh,
More able
absolutely.
to react, more able to, engage in things. My concentration, I think, is much better than it was back then. I do have a little touch of ADD where I want to kind of follow the dopamine, as they say, right?
That's why we get
Well,
along so well. I have
that's
that
right.
same problem.
And I want to working from the garage today, we were talking about components on a vehicle, and I wanted to learn everything there is to learn about that particular component. Right
Right.
now, those are things that I think I had a difficult time doing in that era of my life. Where now it's like, okay, well, I have now satisfied my need for that. Right. So
Yeah.
what's next?
Yeah.
So one thing about this industry is it's full of challenges, and there's always new things, new issues, new developments. And when you work with the right team, you find that you're able to conquer them more easily, and you're able to get through them. Which goes back to another thing that I say all the time. My team hears this very, very frequently from me, but none of us are as smart as all of us, right?
Oh,
Um,
100%.
and we talk about that a lot. We also talk about the alligator closest to the boat concept that we use here.
Oh,
Like
okay. You're gonna have to explain that one because that's a new one to me. And that one strikes me as a bit odd because we were talking about New York, Connecticut. I don't know that alligator closest to the boat is something I would have expected to hear up that way. So enlighten us. What is alligator closest to the boat?
well, what alligator is the most important one to you? It's the
Right.
one closest
It's
to
the
the
close
boat,
to the boat.
right?
Yeah.
So you're always you always have to focus on that most important thing, and that most important thing, the core of everything we do has to be safety. Safety for the passengers, safety for our drivers, safety for everyone on the roads. That's always the core of what we do. But it becomes employee satisfaction, or
Yeah.
this driver's this operator's current biggest problem in the world is X. Is that a problem that we can assist him with? We may not be able to solve it, but let's at
Totally.
least,
Yeah.
show them that it's important to us, be empathetic to their situation. And, I'm sure you've heard that quote, you have to be careful because you never know what somebody else is going through. Right. So
Oh,
what,
absolutely.
what to your point earlier, what for Crawford was probably an idle Tuesday, what was like this pivotal, day for me that I will never forget in my whole life. To this day, I still look up to him. He just had such grace under fire. But yeah, so that's the alligator closest to the boat. And we talk about that all the time. We have my team and I have a couple calls every day, 7 days a
Okay.
week we talk. And we start having an issue of any kind. And we say, okay, well, what's the alligator closest to the boat? And okay, that's the biggest problem. Then that's where we're all going to focus. And we're going to work together to come up with a solution. And we're going to get past that. And then we'll move on to the next alligator until there's no more alligators to worry about. It's just kind of a fun way of saying, hey, let's find our priority and let's work on our priority together. I am very, very fortunate. I won't lie to you. I work with some really talented individuals, not only in the leadership, that I report up to, but on my team, I have some really impressive people with amazing backgrounds. I have a lot of folks who are drivers and have worked their way up in the world, so to speak. They understand what our operators do. They respect what our operators do. I think that's important. I feel blessed with the team that I have, and I wouldn't change them for the world.
Well, and I think you're hitting on something really important and something that I see becomes a bigger and bigger deal as companies scale and you get larger. Having a team that you can trust, having the ability to delegate, like you said, being able to sit down and say, hey, what's the alligator close to the boat? What are we worried about now? What are we taking care of? I think that becomes a much bigger deal, especially as I'll give you an example. One of the things I see all the time is when companies go from one location to two, one of a couple things happen. The companies that figure it out and are ready to move to the third locations are typically the ones that stop and say, hey, what worked in one location, what we were kind of shooting off the hip, doesn't work because we start getting out of sync. And I see a lot of companies, especially because in my world of training, there are companies that I work with that might have 4 or 5 locations that feel like 4 or 5 completely, totally different companies. They don't run the same way. The brand feels different. The safety feels different. The culture feels different. The ones that are really able to kind of scale and develop it are the ones that are able to say, hey, we've got the right people in place. We've got the right systems in place. We've built everything out in a way that we are all rowing in the same direction. And then we're coming together, like you said, and we're tackling those things. I think one of the neat things, and this is a group that you and I have both been a part of, is I think you've got resources out there that often get overlooked. You and I are typically at all the Bus Industry Safety Council events. You and I are very involved there. And I think understanding that you have resources and people you can go to is huge. And by the way, for anyone that's not familiar, Bus Industry Safety Council is a council under the American Bus Association. And kind of our whole goals of Bus Industry Safety Council is to educate and really work on that safety piece. Now, you've been involved. Actually, I believe you're actually involved with Bus Industry Safety Council even longer than I've been, because I know I believe you might have already been involved with them when I came on the scene.
You may have.
Yeah, because if I remember right, that's where we originally met when you were with your last employer. So let me ask you, how has that kind of impacted the trajectory of your career? And what are some of the values or pieces that you get from being involved in that council, from going to those events?
Well, I assumed you knew this, but now I'm thinking back, you didn't. But so Al Smith, longtime member of the Bus Industry Safety Council, was the safety director at Greyhound.
Yeah.
And I was the vice chair of his committee. And
I didn't know that part. I was lucky
so
enough, God rest. I knew Al. He was great, but I didn't know that.
that was kind of the thing that got me interested in coming to Greyhound. And Al kind of pushed me along, and here I am. But and I got to work with Al here for a while as well before he retired. And that was pretty huge, and I really enjoyed it. I will say that some people from the council that brought me into it originally, and kind of promoted the idea of me participating in it. I couldn't be more thankful for it. I think I've learned, a tremendous amount. I think that hearing the information that's presented, and I don't know if I can name drop some of them, but I'm gonna anyway, I guess.
Drop them. Let's go.
Like Mike McDonald, for example, from
Yep.
Southcon.
Yep.
Amazing knowledge. I've learned a lot from the materials that he's presented over the years. Pam Martinez from DATCO, she has delivered some very intricate human resource presentations, many about policies and things like that companies have brought forth. So very interesting stuff, and learned a great deal from them. But the list goes on and on. There's so many talented people there that have so much experience. And when you attend, it's not just going to these sessions. You get networking time with them.
Oh yeah.
You get to know these other folks. And, for me in the beginning, it was really, Al Smith and just learning from Al Smith. And I would have 4 million questions for Al every time I would see him. It was like I kind of saved them up. And Al would very patiently, this is how I would handle this. And, well, if you look in the regulation, Matt, you would see XYZ, right? And, Al was pretty fantastic he was kind of a mentor of mine as well. But, in BISC, we have a mentor program.
Right.
And I think that one of the hardest parts about when you start out in a council like that is you don't know anybody. You feel like the new kid in school, right? And by connecting with a mentor when you're new, it kind of goes away because you almost immediately have somebody, right? You have commonalities with everybody who's there. You're on kind of the same mission, most likely to, learn and grow and develop and help make the world a safer place, really. And I think what we do is very important. So, I think that the Bus Industry Safety Council has been not only good for, my education, but kind of growth as a person as well. So it's been a fantastic experience for me. And I feel very privileged that Greyhound allows me to continue to do that. And I'm very happy to serve as the vice chairman of the council. And, I'm very appreciative of that opportunity.
Well, and I've got to say, I've been to a lot of different groups, and I think you've hit on something really big. You go for your first time ever to a new association, a new group, you're nervous. I've been on both sides of that, right? I've been there as a vendor, I've been there as a member, and I can tell you, the big thing is always trying to kind of get over that hump of the first day of school, right?
Yeah.
I always think back to when I was a kid and it's the first day of school at a new school and you don't know anybody and you're terrified. And back to what we said earlier, right? For everyone else, it's Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever day of the week it is, right? They're all seeing their buddies. But that first one is always really tough. And one of the things that instantly let me know I was in the right place with the Bus Industry Safety Council is that it really is very much about learning and seeking knowledge. You go to a lot of sessions where it's, I'm the guy that knows everything. I'm going to tell you everything. You got to go through me. I know it all. Whereas what I find is in the Bus Industry Safety Council is a lot more of, you've got all these different people from all these different parts. You've got Pam, who's an HR expert. You've got Mike, who's a compliance expert. You've got Jeff Shanker, who came from law enforcement, has got, the safety background, has got the operations background. You've got all of these different people, right? Sal is the OSHA expert. You've got all of these different walks and all these different perspectives, and you bring them together and suddenly you start getting all of these different viewpoints, and everybody is more worried about educating and networking and communicating and not necessarily about who's right. Now, that said, I think we've all seen a couple heated discussions over how, whatever point, whatever was interpreted and how it applied. But it's one of those things where I can tell you, I've had situations where, I was out West and I was the client and they were asking me some questions about hours of service. And, they had a very specific, super niche, super odd, position on it. I said, well, this is my gut instinct, but I'm going to phone a friend, right? Who did I call? Mike McDonald. Hey, Mike, I know. Yeah, right. Thank you. I said, hey, Mike, hours of service are really one of his things. This is a super niche. And one of the cool things is because the way this council's structured, instead of just like giving me the answer, it was, all right, well, let's walk through the scenario. Let's look at it. Like it became this teaching moment. And I'm forever grateful to people that do that because I think you and I share this commonality. We love to learn. You want to learn. You want to figure it out. You've mentioned Al, which if you wouldn't mind, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about Al because he was great. He was one of those guys that really got it. I think understanding that there's resources like this out there is half the battle. When it comes to Al, are you able to share some of the things that he was able to teach and bring you on? And more so, can you give us a little bit of background? He was a heck of a character when it comes to someone who gets it, knows it, does it. He was right there.
And he had big personality. I think that was a part of it. I can share some about Al, certainly. Al Smith worked for Greyhound for 40 plus years, and he started as a driver in a company that I believe it was a Trailways company that was acquired by Greyhound throughout the history. And Al started out West. And, Al was just, he knew one of the things I think I most appreciate about Al Smith was his ability to relate to the driver, be reasonable, but look for the right way. It wasn't, it was never like a just boom, this is the solution. He always put a lot of thought into things. He wanted the drivers to do the best possible job. He wanted them to go out and do the safest thing possible. And he wanted them to treat the customers well. And he wanted them to represent the company well. And, he would look for a way to do that. And Al Smith, you just, I don't know how well you knew him, but you didn't want to disappoint Al. But not because you were scared of him. You just, I think people just wanted to live up to the man's expectations. And
he was also a tall man.
He was.
I think both of us are safe in saying we both looked up to Al, literally.
Most people did. I think Al was probably 6'3" or 6'4". And
he's a pretty tall guy.
But he was just a phenomenal individual who, drivers to this day, within the company still talk about him. And he was well respected in the community, and just people really looked up to him in many ways, and and regarded him as an expert in the field. And it was an honor to get to work with him and be his vice chair on some committees. And I always look forward to talking to Al. And I'll be honest with you, I was very flattered when Al thought that I could quote unquote replace him. And I told him then that no, I don't think anybody could ever replace you, Al. But it was an honor for him to even think of that for me. So, I've always really appreciated that he thought of me in that regard.
Well, and I think that goes back to the mentorship piece that we talked about earlier, right? I think and we'll call it what it is. Although neither one of us would consider ourselves like the really young guys, we are in an industry where the average age of people, especially on the safety and the training side, are much older than you and I.
Yeah.
I consider myself middle-aged, but a lot of times, I don't know about you, I get told, hey, you're the young guy, you're the kid. And I'm
Yeah.
going,
Yeah.
yeah, 40-year-old kid over here. But I think there's a lot of knowledge that right now is at risk of being lost in our industry because of the fact we're not seeing as many younger people come in. We do have some that have come through, especially in terms of, ownership and the next generation taking over. But I think there's a huge amount of people in our industry that are willing to share that knowledge. When I first came over to the motor coach side, I wasn't involved in BISC yet, but I got put on the driving force. So shout out to Aaron Bloom, who runs the driving force. And now we're a council there. But I got put on the driving force. And when I say I was the least experienced, that's an understatement. So we had Brett Maitland, we had Adam Hall, we had Pam Martinez, we had Mike McDonald. The list just goes on of all of these people that have all of this years and years and years of experience. And here I am coming towards the motor coach industry, obviously, with PAX moving in that space. And very quickly it became, well, we're going to BISC. You need to do BISC. Well, you need to be involved over here. Well, you need to be doing this. You need to be looking at that. And very quickly that kind of helps steer you in the right direction. So I think it sounds like you kind of had similar experiences. So
Yeah.
let me ask you something, and I know what my answer would be, but I'd love to hear yours. What would you tell somebody that is newer to the industry, or maybe even they're a driver and they're looking to get into a different role, or, maybe they're in one role now, want to be involved in a different part, or maybe they're just trying to learn more. How would somebody, you were very lucky in that it almost seems like these guys found you. What would someone do if they wanted to be in that place to be found or to learn more or to pick up a mentor? What advice would you give someone that's looking for that?
Ask questions, be curious, don't accept an answer as what it is, ask why. And you know what? I think a lot of this business is networking, and getting to
Yeah.
know others and don't be bashful. That's the other thing. It's don't be scared to say, what is this? What is AVA all about? What is BISC all about? And it's always encouraged when I talk to other operators who aren't part of it, BISC or AVA or, try it, come to a meeting. I think you'll find that there's a lot being offered there. And you were on all the BISC executive committee calls
Yeah.
where, we are as a team trying to jazz it up a little bit. The best idea contest, I still think that was a lot of fun. I hope that catches on. It's like kind of my baby, but I think it's a cool idea. Hey, throw out your best idea and
Yeah.
hopefully you win some cash, right? But being part of those things, I think will very quickly, bring out for folks the opportunities that are there and help them get the exposure to it that they need to learn. I mean, being new to this industry can be difficult for the same reasons that we're worried about losing that knowledge. Everybody who's been here has been here a long time, and not all of us are quick to warm up to new people. So, I think that the BISC mentor program helps with that. I think just, reaching out and talking to BISC members or, any of that is a helpful thing. And, I gotta say 20 something years ago, when I was, brand new to the industry, I never thought that social media would play such a role, but there are some absolutely amazing, motor coach operator
Oh
groups
yeah.
out there. And I know we talked about Rachel Greenwell on some of our
Yeah.
calls, but
Big shout out to Rachel. She's
yeah,
she's doing great on social media. For
I,
anybody that's not following, that's a driver that is posting videos Rachel, if you want to be on podcast, let us know. But
I'm sure she'd be open to it. But that's the kind of stuff. And I think that by bringing that attention to to the things like when you tell somebody about ABA Marketplace for the first time, how many people are there, all of
Yeah.
the vendors that are there, the marketplace itself, the Broadway piece of it,
It
so
can be overwhelming.
it's such an amazing opportunity. I am
Yeah.
still ever thankful to Dennis Lyons, who invited me to come to ABA for the first time years ago. And, I have been almost every year since then. But, I remember getting back from that trip and telling him, thank you for letting me do that. And, I met so many people. You interface with vendors, and, as an operator, you're always looking at, am I buying the best quality this?
Yeah.
Is this the best way for us to handle this thing? And it's always good to see what's out there, and that was part of the motivation in bringing those vendors that were at the BISC summer conference. It was bring some new faces in, and they really seemed to enjoy their experience there, and they got some really good quality time to talk to folks. But a lot of operators who were there had the opportunity to talk to them, ask questions about their products. And then some of them gave really good educational sessions. And I think that knowledge is so important, and we can all learn from each other. And I think that by continuing doing that and bringing some fresh faces in, I hope that we attract some more people. And I hope that the folks that listen to this, if you're not part of BISC and you're curious, please reach out to James, reach out to myself. We would
Absolutely.
be absolutely happy to talk to you about it, and tell you about the experience. And, I think, it's very educational. It's great networking, and it's also fun, so
Absolutely.
reception that we went to, that ABC hosted, it's so interesting, as somebody in the industry to see the behind the curtain of some other part of the industry, right? So
Oh
the
yeah.
tour of ABC's place, I thought was, I thought it was great. It was so interesting to me and so enjoyable, right? So see where those parts are being stored, seeing how things come together on their end. And then, you see those things roll into your garage, and it's like, wow, I know where you came
Yeah.
from. I
Yeah.
know your whole life story before you got here now. So I think BISC has been one of the best things that I've been able to attend. My actually and fun story for you, a little side
Yeah.
quest here, but I have a son named Matt also, Matt Jr., and he got to go to BISC once when
How old is he?
he's 25 now,
Okay.
and he has a CDL. Got a CDL when he
Awesome.
was the tender age of 20 years old. And
Wow.
he got to go on a couple charters with me, years before,
Yeah.
as a driver. And then he got to drive some trips. And he still actually works in the industry. So, and he loves what he does. And, it's always kind of fun because he got to go to BISC once and he enjoyed it. And he always asked me, how was it? What, who was there and
Right.
all of those things. So it's kind of I guess it's a family business for us now. We're all going to work in transportation maybe, but it was always cool to see him kind of come up in that business.
Well, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head, right? Part of this is having that fire there. Obviously not to withhold the love because we haven't mentioned them yet, but I think one of the coolest part about our BISC events for me is that you have BISC, which is the Bus Industry Safety Council, me being training, you being right. Both of us are in that same safety training space. So that's where we tend to put a lot of our focus. But then you have BusMARC that tags on right to the back of it, which is the
Maintenance.
Bus Industry Maintenance Council. And what's really cool for me about these events is that, unlike a lot of other shows, you've got these moving. So you might be in Florida, we were in Minnesota, California. You've got all of these different places. And typically, what you're going to see is you're going to have meetings on the BISC side that are educational sessions. You've got Safety Compliance Director 101. You've got all of these different pieces there that are really focused on the safety. But then one of my big things that I love doing is on BusMARC, we basically have field trip day, right? That clearly
Yeah.
not the official term for it, but field trip day for us big kids, and we do our site visits. And so, when we were in Minnesota, there were 3 incredible operators that we got to go and see. And so we're getting to see their location, their vehicles, they're touring you through the facility. They're sharing everything that they're doing, how they have stuff structured. And so you're getting to see it from a whole different point of view. And so I always really liked that model, and that you're learning, and me, of course, we have both mentioned we're a little ADD, right? I want to touch it, feel it, see it, run around. Uh, for me, that's always the coolest part of that, is you're getting to learn on the safety side, but then you're getting to see those operations. You're getting to go and be there. And I think that's something that's really unique. Fun story, for us, we have a partnership with ABC where they have all of their vehicle specific van hool training in the PAX training platform. So any operator that's running van hools, you have all the training videos directly from the manufacturers. And that actually came from, Ryan Cornell. I got lucky. We were so we're out in Florida, and we're at their Florida location, which for anyone that hasn't been, is almost like a little campus, right? They basically got a campus there with all the different parts. And we started talking there, and we were able to get something figured out. She put me in touch with Danny, who is the guy that takes care of their in-house training material. And we were able to put something together. And that happened as a result of the Bus Industry Safety Council, because we were doing a tour there. And so for me, I think a lot of this is just really getting out there and getting involved. Now, let me ask you, what, if anything, do you think has been one of the most valuable things you've been able to get from that group? I know you mentioned your time with Al, and you've got things there. Is there any one thing that kind of stands out for you?
I think that the site visits are always something that you always take something back from that
Oh,
site
there's always
visit.
something new. It's awesome.
And if it's not the way that, company XYZ decided to put their parts in a parts room and label them this way that nobody else has ever thought of, it was,
Yeah.
or it's a very unique idea that they've had that is applicable to your facility, it's, or if it's, talking to one of their folks that has the exact same challenge that you have, and they're like, well, this is what I did. And it's like, wow, wait a minute, I didn't think of that,
Yeah.
and you always walk away from them with something, even that. And one of the things that I've always enjoyed is when Jeremy Disbro from the CDSA, when he comes out and with his updates that he provides to the
Oh,
council,
yeah.
I think that's an invaluable service that he provides, because, he is telling you from the enforcement perspective what is going to happen at roadside. And
Yep.
that gives you the ability to, to prep your driver, or to understand it, or to be ready for it in whatever capacity, to have the folks from FMCSA there, to hear from them directly why a rule was made, what that means for you as an operator, and to get to ask them the questions that you probably, could never ask, right? They're standing
Right.
right in front of you, and they're so understanding and so patient, and they have such talented folks that are part of that. It's great opportunity to clarify those things that you're just not sure of, because, this is new, and what does all
Yep.
this mean? When the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse came out, I don't know that I would have ever held the understanding of that whole philosophy like I do now, if it wasn't for all the presentations that I got to go to, and all the people from FMCSA
Yep.
that were there, where you could say to Danielle Smith, before she retired, you could say to her, hey, what does this mean for this scenario? And she would explain that very patiently to you. And, I just think that those are some of those opportunities you can't force,
No.
and going to BISC or to BusMARC or all the above gives you that, that kind of doorway to, and then you go to the reception in the afternoon, and those same people are there, and wait a minute, I didn't ask about, right? So
Yeah.
now you can get a quiet audience with them, and you can kind of say, hey, how does this affect this company, my company, in this capacity? And they'll patiently answer for you, and that's amazing. You're never going to get that at any other event that I've ever attended. So I think that's almost indispensable. It's invaluable. A big thing that was interesting to me is I could ask the actual people from those places and say, how do I deal with this best? Or, what is everyone else doing? So that's a huge part of what I think folks really get out of BISC and BusMARC. And I think we did that exercise at this meeting, the one we were at together, about how many years of experience were in the room,
Oh,
as
yeah.
far as like
Yeah.
mentors, and it was like thousands of years of experience,
It's
right?
it's bonkers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I don't know where else you can go where you have those people all in the same room, and they're all there for the same thing. So I just think that it's a huge opportunity for folks to come in there and to get that knowledge, ask the questions that you have, bring that back to your company, and help make your company, the best possible company it could be.
No, absolutely. To what you're saying about the years of experience, I was thinking to myself the other day, man, 10 years. I've been in this industry for 10 years, right? My kids haven't even been alive 10 years. But you go to BISC and they're like, all right, so 5 years, sit down. 10 years, sit down. Half the room is still standing. 20 years, half the room is still standing, right? You've got all of these people that have been in these roles that know this backwards and forwards. And like you said, I think my answer to that would have mirrored yours almost perfectly. You've just got so much experience. You've got people that you can call on. You're able to find people they're dealing with a lot of the same challenges you are, but they've got that lens of time that they're looking through. And I have yet to meet anyone that wasn't willing to share it with you. So I couldn't agree more. So we're coming close to the very end here. As someone who has been in this industry, who started as a driver, who's kind of gone here now, let me ask you something. If you had to say there's one thing that has been your key, right? This is what got me through to where I am today. This is that pivotal moment or that pivotal action or that pivotal thing. What do you think that would be? And how do you go about trying to find that in your own career?
Along the way, you do. Most people hold more than one job, right? You try something a little bit different, and when you find something that interests you and that you're truly drawn to, I think you have to do that thing. From the time I was a little kid, I had interest in mass transit, buses, trains, things like that. We're always
Hold on.
very
You were the kid drawing the buses on the binder?
Yeah, that was me.
You're one of the few. I've met 3 in my life. Most of us end up here by accident.
I was always interested in it. And,
Yeah.
it was an easy fit for me in that, I could somehow participate in it, and it was, I wanted to learn about the buses, the models, the makes, why do you choose, why do you want to choose an Allison transmission over, whatever, what about that, and
Yeah.
I would always have all the questions that probably, especially in my early days, I'm sure I drove a lot of people nuts. But why, and, it's, so if you're interested in something and you continue to have a thirst for knowledge in that area, I think you stay with it and you put your heart and your soul into it. And,
Yeah.
you do everything you can to make the biggest impact in the best possible way. And, don't forget about your people. I see that meme all the time on LinkedIn. If you're not fighting for your people, do you deserve to be a manager? And, I think you have an obligation to not only teach them the right way of doing things, but to look out for them in inappropriate ways, and to try and help them on their quest for their next move or their education or, help them grow into the next thing. And, you just, that is part of the game. And one of my favorites is also until you become a manager who is capable of creating another manager, have you succeeded? So I mean, if you enjoy this, if you like a challenge, you like an ever-changing business with people, and safety is important to you, I think the motor coach industry is a very satisfying career.
Yeah. I agree. I think you've absolutely nailed it. I think as far as seeing someone that's really gone through what you've gone through, as far as leaving with something, I don't know that we could have left this episode any better. So Matt, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Obviously, you and I have fun doing this kind of stuff. I think we've both kind of got the passion. For anybody who wants to learn more about the Bus Industry Safety Council, BISC, or the Bus Maintenance Council, BusMARC, I would say buses.org is the ABA website. You can go there. I'm on the executive committee with Matt for BISC, so you can reach out to either myself or to Matt. Matt, if anybody has questions, they want to get a hold of you, anything like that, what's the easiest way for them to get a hold of you?
Shoot me an email, Matthew, Mathew, .Maglio, Maglio, at Greyhound.com. And, just let me know what you're interested in hearing about, and we can set some time up to talk.
Awesome. Well, Matt, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a like, leave us a comment. If you want to see more episodes like this, if there's a topic that you wished Matt would have talked about that we've just absolutely got to come back to, leave us a comment, let us know. And we look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode of the Ground Transportation Podcast. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Ground Transportation Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about PAX Training and to contact James, go to paxtraining.com. And for more information about driving transactions and to contact Ken, go to drivingtransactions.com. We'll see you next time on the Ground Transportation Podcast.